It's worse than that. It's 5 seconds after they walked out of Egypt. God's like, I am not against slavery. I'm totally into it. Just make sure they're circumcised. I'm more concerned with circumcision. What's going on with their penises? Hey everyone, welcome to Joel Reads Bible. I'm Joel and I'm reading the Bible so that you really honestly don't have to. And I'm not in a rush, but we are in for a long haul. This is Exodus chapter 12 and it's 50 verses. Our last chapter was really short. So, maybe I should have split this episode up. Look, we're doing one chapter per episode, so I'm not going to mess around. And I don't expect you to either. So here we are, Exodus chapter 12. Did you kids know that God loved killing people? He gets off on it. This book is not going to have the truth of the Bible in it. That would be crazy. It's just going to say really cute stories. Here's some special instructions. Moses delivered 2 stone tablets that got... Actually, I don't want to read ahead. You know what? I don't know. I said I wasn't going to mess around, and all I've been doing so far is messing around. Okay, so let's get into this. This is Exodus chapter 12, and if you would, please be so kind as to subscribe, like this video, and comment on it as we go ahead here. If you have any questions, or if you think I got something wrong, why don't you just put it in the comments? That being said, let's get started and see if God can one-up himself. But here we go. Exodus chapter 12. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, "This month is to be for you the first month of your year." I didn't know the Hebrews had like their own Chinese New Year. I thought we all went by the Hebrew calendar. Well, I guess it's not the Hebrew calendar because it's based on Jesus and they're not really into Jesus. So sorry, I'm wrong about that already. I've already debunked myself. See how easy that is, guys? Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. So this is very detailed. That's a very long verse. There's like 3 sentences to describe exactly how the Hebrews are supposed to divvy up the lamb. This goes back to my point that God is very specific and very clear when he wants things a certain way, okay? So as we move forward in this book and we have other laws and other things that God is saying, we can't go, oh, he just didn't mention that, but he really does think this is important. No. He mentions exactly when he thinks something is important. He tells us exactly how he feels about it. So in this case, you got to share the lambs. You got to figure out how much you can eat. How much you're going to eat. You're going to have just like a whole leg. Okay, we'll do 1 lamb in the family, but you better eat your whole leg. Anyway, the animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. So the goat lambs. You know those classic goat lambs? Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the people of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. That same night they are to eat the meat roasted over the fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw, who would, or cooked in water, boiled meat, but roasted over the fire. That sounds good. Head, legs, and inner parts. Eat the whole thing. Do not leave any of it till morning. Oh my goodness, they're going to be stuffed. That's why they have to make sure. Are you seriously going to eat all of the guts? Are you going to suck down the small intestine? If you don't, if some is left till morning, you must burn it. Hold on. Sorry. Do not leave any of it till morning. But if some is left till morning, you must burn it. Why? Just say burn all the stuff you don't use. What? Do not do not. This is like, it's like, do not leave any of it till morning. But if you are going to, just burn it, okay? It's like the guy writing it was like, don't leave any of it till morning. They're going to have to leave. Like, they can't eat all of that lamb. And I'm asking them to eat the stomach, and I guess it's called the tripe. I don't think, you know what? If you had burn some of it, burn the guts. This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. And I like that. I really do. I like that there's just like, you are heading out the door. Eat it like you're on the run. Eat it like, we gotta go. You also, if you have a lot to eat, eating it fast is the way to go, because then your body doesn't register that you're that full, so you can eat more. So I think that's part of like, finish it. If you don't, we have to burn some of it. So eat it as fast as possible. I like the idea that you're supposed to eat it in haste, because, hey, we're on our way, and God is going to set my people free. Sorry. On the same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn, both men and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. This is something that is actually really important to note. He's bringing judgment down on them. What do you think that means? He's going to bring judgment down on things that don't exist? Is that what this God does? The God of the Bible brings judgment down on false gods? Like he's holding court up in heaven, and he's just got like little puppets or stuffed animals, of like half fox, half people, Egyptian characters. And he's like, You guys were bad. You let your people keep my people as slaves. They're just lifeless stuffed animals just sitting there like this. And he's just like, You did. I'm putting you in jail. Actually, I'm going to burn you. Burning people. Burning bad guys that don't do what I say. And that's when he came up with hell. But yeah, it just seems a little bit funny that he's going to bring judgment on gods that don't exist. But okay, I am the Lord. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. That's why it's called the Passover. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. But make sure you paint the door, because if you don't, I'll think you're Egyptian. I don't know. I don't know all of you. There's so many of you. There's too many. I can't keep track of who's a Hebrew and who's an Egyptian. So if you could just paint the doorway, or else, if you wouldn't mind helping me out. I'm not that on the ball. I need a sign. This is the day you are to commemorate. For the generations to come, you shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. For 7 days you are to eat bread made without yeast. On the first day, remove the yeast from your house. For whoever eats anything with yeast in it from the first day through the 7th day must be cut off from Israel. Now you'll remember the things that happened in Genesis, okay? You'll remember some of the tomfoolery that these characters got up to. And I bet you if we look forward, we will see a lot of just dastardly behavior from these people. But you know what's going to get them cut off forever? You know what's really going to piss this guy off? Yeast. And I don't know if he had a bad experience with yeast, if he had a girlfriend who had an infection, but he hates yeast. And he might be just confused at the different kinds of yeast, you know what I mean? I don't know when yeast came to be in our in the world and used in different cultures. But I have this sneaking suspicion that they were kind of like conspiracy theorists who wrote this. They were like, You know, when 5G came out and people were like, it's making everyone horny, or whatever their complaint, that sounded like Jordan Peterson, or whatever their complaint was, they're like, it's serious and I mean that now. No, if you're going to eat yeast, you guys are going to rot in hell, and it's going to be pure hell. It is. And if you eat yeast like you're having a party, then the next thing you know, that's when he starts crying. So anyway, long story short, they're obsessed with yeast. They're worried about yeast, and I think it's because they don't really know what yeast is. And if somebody in the comments could tell me the obsession with yeast, I am actually really curious. Why does he care about yeast? What's the problem with yeast? On the first day, hold a sacred assembly, and another one on the seventh day. Do no work at all on these days except to prepare food for everyone to eat. That is all you may do. So this is a nice big old holiday with food and partying. And guess what? We wouldn't have been able to have this if God hadn't hardened Pharaoh's heart. So it's actually almost a good thing. Because, you know, there wouldn't be the Passover thing. There really wouldn't be, if God just like got the people out of there. I mean, he could have done a pretty good party just for that. Just like celebrate me for just like removing you without having to kill anyone. Peacefully just taking you out of that land and, you know, putting you in Canaan and like, you know, making them all favorably disposed to welcome you and then become Hebrews as well. I mean, you guys were probably Canaanites. I don't know. You guys were probably Canaanites originally. Celebrate the feast of unleavened bread. Now it's called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's all about flatbread, okay? It's all about pitas. Celebrate pitas, because I love them. I honestly do not like a fluffy bread, because it was on this very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. In the first month, you are to eat bread made without yeast. Did I say that? From the evening of the 14th day until the evening of the 21st day. Is that 7 days? Yes, I've done the math correct on that. For the 7 days, no yeast is to be found in your houses, and whoever eats anything with yeast in it must be cut off from the community of Israel, because I hate yeast, whether he's an alien or a native born. Eat nothing with yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread. I hate yeast. I'm sorry, I hate yeast. Stop, don't eat any yeast. Why? Guys, that was 3 verses, 3 big, thick verses of just hating on yeast. And that's the second paragraph. Why the obsession with yeast? Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, go at once and select the animals for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in blood in the basin, and put some of the blood on the top and both sides of the door frame, like a cross. It's nothing like a cross. Well, it's nothing like a cross, but it's like, why would you even think it's referencing a cross? No reason. No one of you shall go out the door of his house until morning, because I am on the rampage. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the door frame and will pass over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter the houses and strike you down. By the way, the destroyer is a cool title. It's an awesome, I'm the destroyer. You know, I'm picturing the Grim Reaper. The destroyer, whoever this guy is, if he was doing this by himself, sure, put blood on the door frames. By the way, as if that's not the most brutal. It's not like put a flower in the little, it's like put blood, smear blood. It's going to reek, by the way. It's going to stink. Paint disgusting goat or sheep blood all over your door frame. And so I get the hint. No, don't go in. That's one of ours. Destroyer. Sorry, that's one of ours. Don't go in and kill that one. This one, get this one. Is that, sorry, it's brown. I don't know if the blood dried. Here. Yeah, Yeah, that one's bloody. Also, we're in Goshen, so most of these are going to be my Hebrews. Obey these instructions as a lasting ordinance for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you as he promised, observe this ceremony. And when your children ask you, "What does this ceremony mean to you?" then tell them, "It is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord who passed over the houses of Israel in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians." Then the people bowed down and worshipped. The Israelites did just what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of the livestock as well. Last chapter, it was the firstborn of the slave girl. But now he's like, hey, here's another victim. I just want to be very clear that I'm being ridiculous here. Because the slave girl, okay, I get it. You're killing a slave, that's going to affect the Egyptians. That's going to affect Pharaoh. It's going to affect everyone. They're like, no, I was going to use that person. I was going to make them do things until they die. I was going to work them to the bone. I don't see how killing the prisoner's firstborn is going to affect anyone but the prisoner. They're already in jail. You want to add insult to injury here? Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. You did it, God! You did it! Great! There was not a house without someone completely dead. You killed them. You nailed it. So proud of you. Well done. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you have said, and go, and also bless me." Okay, Pharaoh. Pharaoh's like, get out of here. You guys suck. You guys are ruining everything for me. Things are going really, really bad right now. If you wouldn't mind blessing me before you go, I want you to make your God, like me a bit more. Can you just bless me real quick just so I don't feel completely bad about what's been going on here? The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country. For otherwise, they said, we will all die. Oh, they think God's just getting started, which, fair enough. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added and carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs, wrapped in clothing. This is so important. Someone tell me why. I don't want to Google it. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed to being towards the people, and they gave them what they asked for. So they plundered the Egyptians without any trouble. If God has this kind of power, and he's willing to infringe on free will, why couldn't he have done this in a positive way before? Because he wouldn't have showed all the wonders, right, guys? He wouldn't have showed all the wonders and been able to kill a slave girl's son. I forgot. This was all worth it. Thanks, God. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot besides women and children. 600,000 men. So the estimate could be around 2 million people. That's a lot of people. The desert out there is probably teeming with archaeological evidence. Many other people went up with them, as well as large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. That's tons of stuff. With the dough they had brought from Egypt, they baked cakes of unleavened bread. The dough was without yeast, by the way, because they had been driven out of Egypt and did not have time to prepare food for themselves. What? The dough was without yeast because you were told 1,000,000 times not to put yeast in it. What are you talking about? Is the description of how they're supposed to celebrate the Passover in the future, having bread without yeast, because they wouldn't have had time to put yeast in the bread because they were driven out so quickly. Because they had to leave so quickly, they didn't have time to use the yeast. So when you celebrate this, you're supposed to eat unleavened bread kind of as a reference to that. Because you did it in the wrong order, God. You gave the instructions on how to do the thing before the event. So now it's a little bit confusing. It seems like they purposely left with a bunch of dough without yeast because you told them to. Now, the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, to the very day, who cares? It's 430, whatever. All the Lord's divisions left Egypt. Because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt, on this night all the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for generations to come. What does it mean to keep vigil? I wonder what the Israelites do today. I wonder, do they just all stay up all night looking outside or something? Like, did you hear something? Like, what is keeping vigil? How do they, I don't know what it means to keep vigil. What are you doing? Just keeping vigil? Just trying to keep vigil. Takes a lot of coffee to keep vigil. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "These are the regulations for the Passover. No foreigner is to eat of it. Any slave you have bought may eat of it after you have circumcised him." Now, they've just left the country. They left the country a little more than 10 verses ago. They've just stepped foot out of Egypt, being freed as slaves. God is like, I don't want my people being slaves. This is important. By the way, when you guys have slaves, perfectly fine. When you guys have slaves, they can participate in this Passover only if they become circumcised, which goes back to, I think it's Genesis 17, the original circumcision covenant, where God's like, hey, look, in the slaves you buy from your foreigners, that's fine. You just make sure they're circumcised as well. At least that part of it's consistent here. You can get your slaves to be Hebrew, I suppose, to be under that covenant, and then they're allowed to have some of this unleavened bread and some of these sheep that are actually also goats sometimes. But guys, this surprises me because I know that later on in Exodus, I think it might be Exodus 25, it might be 20, I'm not 21, something like that, God gives instructions on how to keep slaves. And when we're talking about these things and discussing this with Christians, oftentimes the argument comes up on the ex-Christian or non-believer side. How could God say you can have slaves a few chapters after the Israelites just left slavery? It's worse than that. It's 5 seconds after they walked out of Egypt. God's like, I am not against slavery. I'm totally into it. Just make sure they're circumcised. I'm more concerned with circumcision. What's going on with their penises? That's what matters to me. Then they can eat the bread that's not going to have yeast, because I'm obsessed with yeast and penises. I'm totally fine with slavery. But a temporary resident and a hired worker may not eat of it. It must be eaten inside one house. Take none of the meat outside the house. Do not break any of the bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate it. An alien living among you who wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover must have all the males in his household circumcised. Then he may take part like one born in the land. No uncircumcised male may eat of it. The same law applies to native born, to the alien living among you. Cut your foreskin off. If you don't cut your foreskin off, what good is this? Like, what's the point of this? If you got that extra skin, what's the point of it if your penis is intact? Honestly, what is right? Like, you got to think like that. Cut it off. Okay? Even the foreigners, cut it off. The aliens living among them are like, yeah, we're good. I'm just gonna have this baguette. I'm just gonna have this leavened crusty, but also very fluffy bread. It's an Italian loaf. It's really nice. My wife just made a sourdough. It's ornate. It's really fancy. It's really cool. Spelt flour, I believe. But yeah, and it's gonna have, it's a spongy thing, but it has definitely had yeast. It's just got that amount of give. It's not as much of the fluffy. Sorry, you don't care? Okay, yeah, no. Yeah, but I'd rather honestly eat that and not cut my dick off. Thanks. All the Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. And on that very day, the Lord brought the Israelites out of Egypt by their divisions. Well, that is chapter 12, and I am just floored by how ridiculous this story keeps getting. Why are we so concerned with yeast? If this yeast thing is just one simple metaphor for them having to hurry out of Egypt thing, then cool, but lots of detail for that. And I feel like there's going to be more detail in that than in a lot of the other ideas that we see in the Bible moving forward. And then this slavery thing is just, what? Chapter 12. Wow. Chapter 12, and you're already saying slavery's fine again. It was bad when you were in it, but it's fine when you do it to other people. That's nuts. That's absolutely nuts. But look, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Subscribe, ring the bell, like the video, leave me a comment telling me if you like yeast, and we will see you next time for Exodus chapter 13. Bye.